Hello, boys and girls. Another edition of Spooky Tales, PACCtv. I am your host, Con Shaughnessy. We have Spooky Campfire Tales. Tonight's story will be The Music Lesson. She had not been studying organ long, but already she loved it passionately. Was contemplating a musical career when she finished school. There was only one thing that marred her enjoyment, and that was the lonely nighttime practice sessions in the echoing empty chapel. Something about the place frightened her. She never felt safe until she was actually in the organ loft. Packing up her organ books, the girl left her dorm room and hurried down toward the arched cloisters that connected the school to the chapel. Already her skin was prickling. Goosebumps were rising on her arms as she thought of the empty church. Don't be ridiculous, she told herself, lifting her chin and straightening her shoulders. The girl marched bravely into the lonely, echoing church. Its huge stained glass windows loomed dark and bleak in the twilight. She could hear every footstep running through the sanctuary as she walked. It was so very large and so very empty. Anything might be hidden in the dark shadows that lurked in each corner. She quickened her pace. The girl began to relax when she reached the spiral staircase leading up to the altar. She gave a sigh of relief when she parted the velvet curtain at the top of the staircase and stepped into the loft. She put her books down and arranged herself on the bench, shivering a little in the sun and cold that swept around her. It was strange to feel such a chilly breeze on a warm night in early summer, she thought, feeling spooked. The girl was about to put her feet on the pedals when suddenly a single pure note came from the organ. She froze in place and stared wide-eyed at the keyboard. She just played all by itself. The chill all around her increased perceptibly. Shudders of cold and fear shook her from head to toe. In that moment, she was convinced that she was not alone in the echoing darkness of the empty church. A sudden movement by the velvet curtain caught her eye, and the girl turned her head. Standing in front of the curtain was a portly, middle-aged woman in a long, light blue dress. The woman was flickering slightly in and out of existence like a bad film strip, and she was translucent. The girl could see the velvet curtain right through the phantom's body. The woman seemed to be staring at something or someone sitting on the bench with the girl. Chills went up the girl's spine as she remembered the strange note that had come unaided from the organ. Convinced that she was occupying the same space as a ghostly organ student about to have a music lesson, the girl leapt to her feet and fled for the spiral staircase, even though that meant heading straight toward the other phantom. Head down, eyes on the floor, the girl ran right through the flickering woman blocking the velvet curtain. For a moment, she was eclipsed by a terrible cold that made her limbs shake, and her stomach do flip-flops of sheer terror. Then she was racing down the staircase, across the echoing aisles of the chapel, and out the cloistered archways toward safety in the school. She told the whole story to her house mistress, even drawing her a picture of the flickering phantom. The girl absolutely refused to go back to fetch her organ music, which was left in the loft until the next morning, and she never played the organ again. Our next story is called I Can't Get In. We attended the local dance together, my pal Arnie and I, and we made quite a splash among the fair ladies, if I do say so myself. What with the pretty company and the illicit moonshine they were serving in the punch, Arnie and I ended the evening a little worse for wear. Do you remember how to get home? I asked Arnie blurrily. There were at least 3 Arnies warring for dominance in my vision. I addressed my question to the middle one, but it was the one on the far right who answered me. Sure I do, Arnie said cheerfully. Just follow me, Jack. He headed out the door in the wrong direction, at least. I was pretty sure it was the wrong direction. I caught him by the arm, spun him around before he walked into the river. A sudden twist turned his broad red face an interesting shade of green. The sight of his queasiness made my stomach start to feel funny too. Let's go this way, I suggested, pointing toward the road in front of the dance hall. Great idea, Arnie said, and plunged forward. Literally, I picked him up from the ground, dusted him off a bit, and carefully negotiated my way around the large root that had tripped him up. Then we were free and clear, walking down the blurry road toward our homes, which stood side by side on the other end of the neighborhood. I never knew how much effort walking took. Getting one foot in front of the other and sending them both in the direction I intended, while not bumping into obstacles, was quite a challenge. Jackie, my friend, I think maybe we've had a bit too much to drink on you, Arnie said to me as he walked into a low-hanging branch on the side of the road. Do tell, I invited, catching him before he fell over again. I am telling you, Arnie said, blinking owlishly at me, so you're not looking too good. This was an understatement. Every thud of my feet against the ground was making my stomach do flip-flops. My head felt as if a few dozen drummers had taken up residence inside. If I had a mirror, I was sure my complexion would have been a sickly shade of green. As it was, I felt pale and sweaty and not well. Let's just get home quick, I said to Arnie, who nodded in complete understanding. He was a much larger guy than I was, standing over 6 feet tall and built like a linebacker, so the moonshine hadn't quite hit him as hard as a medium-sized string bean like me. At least not yet. We could cut through the graveyard and save 10 minutes, Arnie suggested, pointing to the left. I peered intently into the darkness. Things were still crisscrossing and blurring in front of my eyes, but I finally made out the distinctly cut shapes of some tombstones and at least one mausoleum. The local graveyard was fairly well tended, with gravel paths and nicely cut grass and just enough shade trees to make it a pleasant place to visit the recently departed during the daytime. At night, the shadows deepened and darkened mysteriously, hither and thither among the stones, as if they had a life of their own. The wind moaned through the trees, rustling the leaves until they sounded like the voices of the dead. I ain't going in there, I said firmly, turning away with an air of finality and knocking myself in the head with the same branch that had just beamed Arnie. The drumming did not help my poor aching head one bit. Oh, yes you are. Said Arnie, taking me by the arm, walking us both right back into the low-hanging tree branch. We picked each other up off the ground and staggered into the graveyard. Spooky! I whispered to Arnie, getting rather carried on my ooh sound. He must have liked the tone because he repeated my comment, and his booming voice echoed strangely within the mausoleum on our right. I know I said there was nice gravel paths in the local graveyard, but Arnie and I didn't find any that night. We just wove our way through the graves, walking all over the good dead folk of our village in our determination to get home in one piece. I don't know which was spinning more, my head or my stomach, but all at once I knew I couldn't go on. We reached the middle of the graveyard, and I couldn't move a step further without being sick. Motioning Arnie to keep going, I dodged behind the tombstone, finally got rid of all the food I'd eaten at the dance. Staggering away from the smelly mess I'd made, I sank down on a handy grave and leaned back against the tombstone to rest. I could hear Arnie humming to himself as he climbed over the ornamental iron fence that surrounded the graveyard and fell face down on the pavement on the far side, right next to the open gate. The whole world was still shaking slightly. My stomach was still touchy too. So I stayed where I was as Arnie staggered to his feet and continued on down the road. Suddenly I felt a bony tap on my shoulder. It was so unexpected that I gave a shriek of surprise and whipped my head around to look behind me. I was expecting another low-hanging branch, but that met my gaze of something much worse. A tall, gleaming white skeleton with a flickering blue light glowing in its eye sockets was gazing down on me from beside the tombstone. "Excuse me, young man," the skeleton said politely. "What?" I replied hoarsely, unable to catch my breath. "You appear to be sitting on my grave." The skeleton continued. What, I said, staring bug-eyed with fear. My heart was thundering in my chest and my muscles were frozen stiff. "Can you hear me?" asked the skeleton, waving a bony hand in front of my eyes. I said, "You were sitting on my grave and I can't get in." "Well, what?" I gasped. The skeleton leaned down until his bony face The blazing blue lights, there was eye sockets were right in front of me. I said, it repeated slowly and patiently as if it were speaking to a very deaf person. You are in my way and I can't get into my grave. That did it. Wah! I screamed, sleeping up from the grave, fleeing for my life. Faintly just above the sound of my screams and pounding feet, I heard the skeleton mutter, really, young people these days, no respect for the dead. Then it climbed back into its grave. I passed Arnie on the road and kept right on going. Eventually I collapsed on my front porch, clinging to railing with both hands as I caught my breath. I was stone cold sober and shaking like a leaf when Arnie came up with me. What happened, he shouted. You look like you've seen a ghost. No, just a skeleton, I replied, laughing hysterically in fear and relief. Then I told him the whole story. He didn't believe me, of course, even though I swore on a stack of Bibles that it was true. Told me I was drunk and imagined the whole thing, which of course might have been the truth for the matter. Still, I never walked through that graveyard again, just in case.
Bye-bye.